Hello. I have to say I am incredibly excited to be here in a physical space, and I know the guys here as well. We were chatting just before we came to the building, actually, and we were just talking about how buzzy it is, and also how much of a welcome change it is. I mean, Mungo talked about this box he's been living in, and we certainly all have as well. So definitely a welcome change, and I have to say, you know, it's certainly a reinforcement for out of home being back, which is fantastic. I'm just going to quickly introduce the panel. We've got a stellar lineup. We've got three of the biggest specialists that plan and buy for out of home with us today. So we've got Kloe Wells, who joins us from Talon as Senior Sales Manager. We've got Curtis Weir from Publicis, Group Out-of-Home Director, and Chris Ho, who joins us from Posterscope as Innovation Director. So between them, we've got a hell of a lot of experience, not only from out-of-home, but also coming from backgrounds that range from audio, digital, and agency. So we're certainly in for a good chat today. And I guess just to kick things off, if we have a think about where we are as a channel, you know, I have to say I'm incredibly excited. I think we're in an amazing place, and I think it's a really exciting time for out of home. So putting obviously the blip of 2020 behind us and moving forward, I'm gonna steal a quote from my worldwide CEO, William Eccleshare. He talked about out of home as being the oldest medium, but the one with the brightest future. And I definitely resonate with that. I think it's so true of the medium. We've got this amazing channel that allows for broadcast reach. You know, we reach 98% of the UK population. We are famous for building trust for brands, which is incredibly important, particularly now. We're also a brand safe channel, and we're incredibly inclusive. So many things going for us. But if you then add in the continued investment as a medium, you know, we're investing a lot in digital, we're investing a lot into tech, and that just really opens up the opportunity. So, you know, we're becoming an incredibly agile and flexible channel. And with that brings context and immediacy, which is what we're here to talk about today. So to talk about out of home and the programmatic journey. So I'm gonna kickstart with a question to the custodians of out of home that we have here. I'm gonna start off with Kloe, but for everyone to sort of answer is thinking about programmatic out of home. Let's talk about the benefits of it, not only for advertisers, but also for out of home as an industry. And thinking about your own business, you know, how has your business embraced programmatic out of home, and how have you pivoted as a business? So, Kloe, if you want to kickstart.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me in person. It's great. So at Talon, we have fully embraced programmatic out of home lovingly. I'm going to start with the end of your question there, actually, because we already had a DMP that was in existence, and we decided that one of the greatest benefits we could bring would be to create our own DSP, so Atlas. So fully embracing the world, so much so that we kind of went from post-it notes on a wall in Talon HQ to a fully working DSP 8 or 9 months later. But I think for us, the benefit that we saw there was galvanizing all of that fantastic data that we had in the DMP and automating it via programmatic. But for me, actually, one of the greatest benefits for the industry as a whole is what programmatic is allowing us to do in terms of shifting mindset amongst the kind of industry clients and kind of our brethren in the room too. And that is moving us from an industry that thinks about ourselves as formats and environment into an industry that thinks about audiences and plans and buys audience first, as opposed to that screen in that location, thinking about the audience at the very heart of everything that we do, which I think is really important. One of the greatest things that programmatic is giving to outdoor.
100%. And Curtis, from your perspective, I mean, just to kind of state, you know, Publicis, you've recently bought the planning and buying of out of home in-house. What's your kind of view on the benefits, and where are you guys at as a business?
I think the main benefit has been the opportunity to have new conversations, I guess, to reappraise how out of home is from the ground up. You know, Maurice Levy frequently spoke about break, bond, and build, and that's definitely what we've been up to in the last couple of months. Restructuring the way that we operate, thinking about you know, the entire business model. You know, we are very much part of the revolution and the change that's been happening in the media space. You know, that happened many moons ago with, you know, the Napsters of this world, and we're seeing this disruption within our space as well. I think, you know, we've obviously had huge disruption last year, but in reality, it's just been an accelerant for a lot of the things that were happening anyway. So, you know, despite being all at home, you know, there's been a lot of meetings across departments and divisions in terms of how is it that we can get this right for clients? How is it that we can make things simpler ourselves so that we can innovate on top of that simple platform? And it's not easy, it's not challenging, but so far it's been quite rewarding.
I think that, you know, that's a really good point about, you know, the last 12, 15 months that we've all gone through. You know, whilst a very hard year for out of home, it was also an opportunity for us to accelerate. I think that's a really good point. And Chris, what about from a Posterscope perspective?
Yeah, I mean, we've gone through the same accelerating period that the rest of the industry has at the same time. And like Kloe over at Talon, we had our own DMP with which to build activations off the back of as well, and housed in Ecos is what we call it. Now, the value to the clients of programmatic digital out of home, I think is something that I want to focus on a bit more here. There's a survey that's conducted by Dentsu's, the CMO survey, which is done across 1,000 odd CMOs around the world. And two things that they highlighted as being really important for them as areas of focus going forwards are hyper agility and hyper empathy. And that's basically those two. What they really mean is that they want to know their consumers in real time and be able to activate them rapidly. And programmatic digital out of home lets us do that. It lets us have out of home specifically when business critical data triggers are met, and only when you want it. So the value for the clients is that for brands and clients are there as quite a strong proposition. But on the other side of it, when you're looking at the out of home industry, it like my colleagues, I suppose, have said prior to this.
Your custodians as well in the same space.
My fellow custodians, yeah, that works. Have said a large part of it is about reframing the conversations that we're able to have with brands. But another part of it is it's adding new value to existing inventory, right? So there's a really classic example of, I don't know, the most straightforward example is looking at temperature to enable different purchases. But one brand, say you're a suntan lotion, might want to be active when it's sunny. If you're selling holidays to Monaco, you might want to be active when it's gloomy. So there's 1,001 new ways to approach value in out of home, and that's opening the door to a lot of new opportunities for us.
Anything else to add on that point, guys?
I think it's very well said. I think the new conversations is a great point to make, actually, because I think as a medium, being part of the omni-channel kind of conversation is going to be ever important going forward, and this allows us to have those conversations with digital teams, with social teams that I think, having worked out of home a very long time ago and coming back to it myself personally, we never thought we were going to be having those conversations with those teams and agencies. So I think you're right that the new conversations, the new doors that it's opening are a big plus.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we've gone from a stage of this was a concept. You know, the reality is there's a lot of test and learn, and there's so much further we could go. And I think, you know, Mungo even touched on it with regard to audio and the journey they've been on. And, you know, ultimately we're looking for those incremental gains, and there's a clear opportunity for those. So most definitely. Now, we sort of talked about the benefits, but thinking about programmatic, you know, the reality is it's a new route into out of home. From a clear channel perspective, we talk about 4 sales channels. We talk about manual, which is where concentration of revenue comes from. We talk about direct. We talk about automation and programmatic. Obviously, there's more than one sales channel. It's not just programmatic. So can we maybe just spend a bit of time thinking about the role of programmatic amongst those sales channels? Because I think that, that's an important piece. It's not a standalone. So perhaps, Chris, do you want to kick off?
Yeah. I think that's a really valuable question. And it's probably something we don't ask ourselves enough when we're showing off the shiny new toy of programmatic out of home. But the way that I kind of like to look at it is, if you imagine yourself from the consumer's perspective and you're seeing a digital out of home screen on the street, you have no idea whether that's been bought programmatically or not. So the same rules for good, effective out of home still apply across your planning. So the same reason that people come to out of home for its unique ability to achieve instant mass reach, like you were saying, 98% coverage of the population, the ability to be contextual within environments and in different locations, and then the final part of being tactical and with your timing, like around paydays, for example, or key tentpole moments throughout the year. Now, programmatic is able to address those core values with different levels of success, right? So if we use the example of a film client, like E1 for the Publicis guys, or Lionsgate for us, for example, if their core metric to shift is getting as many bums on seats during that box office weekend, and they need to they have as much presence in the 2 weeks preceding that as possible, then programmatic probably isn't your answer. Because fundamentally, 95% of the market will be buying out-of-home inventory 8 weeks before you. So by the time you get there, there's a chance you won't get as much as you want, but there's a very low chance that you will get everything that you want. So it doesn't fit as well into those scenarios as it does into some others. When it comes to context, there's still a lot of cherry picking that you can do with sites within programmatic. There's OpenRTB has layers on top of it where you can choose certain sites, and OpenDirect by its very nature is a buyer-initiated process. So you are only going to buy what you want to get. But where it starts to really shine is when we start to look at that tactical timing element. And I mentioned paydays previously, and the reason we might want to activate around paydays is because you have insight about there being uplifts in sales around paydays. But thanks to programmatic digital out of home, you can just cut out the middleman there and say, why don't we just link it directly to store sales? And then you'll get your digital out of home exposure tied directly to shifting the dial on those particular business KPIs that you're looking for. Can you repeat the question again? I kind of just rambled there and then just...
So effectively, we talk about, there's more than one route into out of home, so the role of programmatic. And I guess it's ensuring that, we continue to plan, buy and activate all out of home,
Yeah, I think if we start to think of it from that, thanks for that, kind of getting me on track. If we kind of look at it as that tactical element of out of home, you can see the ways that you can layer it together quite similar to that classic Les Binet chart, of that long-term brand building and that short-term sales activation. So you could have your guaranteed presence of pre-buying a 2 week or 4 week or slot of out of home with tactical upweights on top, which are relevant to the KPIs you want to drive. Or you could be launching a product and have a large upfront guaranteed booking with a longer tail of sustained programmatic out of home. Yeah, so there's different use cases for the different buying routes, but they'll always work best when they're used in complement.
Yeah, and Curtis, I love how you reference time horizons. Do you want to expand a bit more?
Yeah, sure. So the poster specialist existed before the media agency. And, to put some historical context to that, that's fundamentally based on operations, logistics, delivery. all of these things about getting a campaign live was how the industry kind of emerged and manifested itself. Because, you know, every 4 weeks, as it once was before in charges were 2 weeks, nothing short of a logistical miracle used to take place when someone probably risked breaking their neck climbing up a ladder in order to post a campaign. Right? So there's a long legacy that's emerged and manifested itself, you know, AdShell in the 60s in the UK. There's been a long evolution and change in terms of how out-of-home works. And digital technology has, you know, existed arguably to some degree, you know, probably not enough to hit the chart in terms of percentages of billings, but, you know, to some extent about 20 years in terms of the first screens in public spaces in train stations, transvision. And you've seen this evolution that's come across, especially over the last decade, 2011. No coincidence to me joining Out of Home in 2011. I take no credit for the rapid growth in the channel. To a point where you're not just thinking about weights and rates and seasonality and 2-week cycles, but you can actually think about what is it that I need to do in the next hour? You know, what decisions can I make in terms of my media deployment to affect my business or affect my client's business within an hour window? That's huge. You know, that's from, you know, you've got a horizon there of 12 weeks all the way to the hour before. And I think the decisions that you need to make in digital or out of home as a whole will fundamentally are informed by just that hard reality of what decisions do you need to make in an hour, what decisions do you make in 12 weeks, and what decisions do you make in between that in what used to be called, I guess, the short-term market. And, you know, you couple that with the other reality of the fact that there is obviously an abundance of supply and, you know, impression multipliers aside, you know, at the end of the day, the standard model for everybody is 1 in 6. You know, there's 10 seconds in 60 seconds to have the opportunity to display your message. So it's still a finite medium, you know, versus the online display. So you have to factor that in. And if you think of those two things in terms of when is it that you want to make buying decisions, at what frequency you want to optimize, and then you think about being able to get the opportunity to be seen in the first instance, you start to kind of make different buying decisions for an hour to a day to 10 weeks, or maybe even shorter, and you know, traditionally 12 weeks and beyond. So that also changes the function of audiences as well. That's probably the last thing to say, which is, you know, where is it that you need to try to deliver broadcast reach, you know, your +1 cover, and try to, you know, pretty much mirroring what Chris says, you know, try to do that brand building exercise where you want people to see your advertising en masse. That's one of the, you know, fundamental beauties of our channel, that lots of people get to see your advert at the same time, you know, kind of, you know, cinema is our close cousin in that respect in terms of similarity, but obviously not to the same level of scale. So there's the cover dynamic, and then the last thing is, I guess, now we're able to kind of segment our scheduling and buy spots to keep it simple. Where there are opportunities for growth segments, where there are opportunities for these micro segments that could drive incremental growth, new audiences, or new people coming into the market that can help our clients drive growth by building fandom and early adoption of new services and products as well. So they're the dynamics, if you will, that we think about when we plan our out-of-home programmatically.
Yeah, and you touched on some of the differences that exist as well, so I think we'll come back to that in a second. Kloe, from your perspective, the role of programmatic?
Well, I'm going to say something quite controversial, and I think it's really important for us to also remember when programmatic is not the right route, because, you know, there's many things that it does fantastically well, in correlation with classic plans, but I don't think it replaces the role of, we spoke about, your traditional paper and paste sites, and that they definitely still have a place in this world. And I think, like actually mirroring what you said, Chris, one of the fantastic things about how our audiences consume out of home, they don't know if it's been bought programmatically or whether it's been bought via a traditional classic route. To them, it's a trusted media. It's a media that often, when a brand advertises upon it, it gathers some form of stature, just simply by being there on that poster site that's part of their community or in their tube journey every morning. It's the one that they go to because they know that's where they get on the train. That's how, it's how I use the 48 sheets on the Underground. And that doesn't change no matter the buying route. So I think it's also important to remember that, yes, there are differences between the activational aspects, but there's some really fantastic principles that are at the core of what we do on both sides of the fence.
Yeah, very well said. So I think just picking up on the point about the differences that exist. So, a term we sort of use in out of home is programmatic but different. And I think, the word programmatic obviously comes from the online world. And it is incredibly exciting about the physical public world that we live in, working with the digital private world. And, there's so much that comes with that, but we do need to recognize some of those differences. So, Curtis, I don't know if you want to kick off.
Yeah, I think, the fundamental difference, as I kind of hinted at before, is that one-to-many audience, right? There's some qualities that are inherent in the way that audiences experience out of home, which are unique to it. The movement across spaces is three-dimensional. All right, it's a 2D, it's a screen normally showing a 2D ad, but it's in context to the things that are around it. I think out of home is kind of a mirror that kind of reflects the conversations and the hopes and aspirations of the people that see it. That's something kind of, that manifests itself as a result of, the luxury clients in the shishi parts of town and, the FMCGs that, try and speak to heads of households. There's something inherently, we talk about contextually relevant as if it's something that doesn't just, always exist. It's just now we've got more ownership over that. I think, supply, infinite amounts of, out-of-home impacts is not what our channel's about. It's about increasingly, I think, our plant, the out-of-home space, is reduced over the last decades, right? It's like the quality has got better and more focused and more refined as, there's now the opportunity to be seen when you want to be on a digital screen, whereas in the online space, it's the opposite. It's, you've got a website, throw a few banners on there, jump onto an exchange, right? Like, that's not, the digital infrastructure, the investment that's been put in the out-of-home space to improve the quality, but make the most desirable sites accessible to more advertisers as a result of digital is something that is different to the online space.
So, Kloe, we talked a bit about, great similarities, but also the differences that are worth pointing out, but also how it complements. What's your thinking?
So, I think obviously both sides of the coin are ultimately powering data, or powered via data, I should say. But one of the key things, and I don't necessarily know what the answer to this is, one of the key differences between our world and that world is measurement. And that we have one side of the coin that, this digital world, display and video, that can be tracked to the nth degree, whether it's cost per click or sound on completed views, all these kind of metrics that we're able to track online, that we simply can't pick up and transfer into our world. And that's not to say that our world isn't doing equally as good a job in different ways, in different manners, and supporting different parts of the purchase funnel. But it's probably something as an industry we need to nurture and be mindful of as we move very quickly into this space.
And I know definitely, Chris, this is a passion point for you when talking about data, but you know, importantly, the accountability.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, this is probably something I could go off rambling and forget the question again, but...
we don't have time for that.
Okay, fine. Keep it focused, I get it. Yeah, well, I think that's a really valid points that both of my fellow custodians have made. That being a one-to-one channel versus being a one-to-many channel is the fundamental distinction of the interaction that's happening there, right? And as part of being a one-to-one medium, you can collect a lot of individual level and accountable data. But that's not to say that in our out-of-home, our one-to-many medium, we've not been making massive advancements in terms of location data and attribution. So location data, for most people outside of our industry, probably wasn't really on their radar like 18 months ago. But since then, it's been on the front page of every different news editorial as we try and track the pandemic. And that's created fundamental shifts in infrastructure and how we can look at location data, which means that we're a hell of a lot more clued up and have a lot more different data partners and attribution methods at our disposal than we ever have before. But because we've also been building up our programmatic digital out-of-home pipelines and connections, it kind of means that we have more in common now with the digital world than we ever have before. We're speaking the same language, right? So there's a really interesting symbiosis, I suppose, that's happening between the two channels where we could now activate off of the back of live digital engagement rates, or we could inform in a privacy safe way, which is something which is desperately needed in the digital space at the moment, based on our real-time location data that's all aggregated. We could help them inform their targeting. So there's a really nice synergy that we can bring together between the two different channels now, which didn't exist prior to this.
Yeah, definitely. And this is, you know, what we sort of talked about and Mungo touched on as well is, you know, there is so much scope. And that's incredibly exciting, right? We could chat for hours. Unfortunately, we don't have the time to do that. So I believe we're going to go to a Q&A now.
Hi. Yes. Oh, that's not good. We've got a bunch of questions again from people online, and a couple as well from me. Aimee, I wanted to start with you actually, which was you've just set up a launchpad to deal with programmatic, and I was wondering how are you adapting as a media owner to the new types of trading that you're having to deal with?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, touching on the fact that we recognise that, you know, obviously there's multiple access points into out of home, but, you know, programmatic certainly is incredibly important to us. I mean, our vision as a business is about creating the future of media. It's about always pushing forward, and we certainly recognise that programmatic is a great opportunity. And I think coming back to something that Mungo said, you know, this is all about ease of access. This is about what customers want. So we launched Launchpad a couple of weeks ago, which is our gateway into programmatic trading. It's a Europe-wide initiative. I think we've got 5 markets live at the moment. You know, for us, really important, we've got AdTECH Live, which is the UK's largest digital roadside network. And it's certainly a space that we're entering into. From our perspective, it's all about us dealing with the best SSPs out there. So, you know, unlike Global and DAX, we're not going to build our own, but we're going to work with the best SSPs in the market.
Cool, sounds good. Is that scale kind of really important? Like you mentioned it was specifically for Europe. So rather than just each market do their own thing.
Actually, it's probably quite interesting that that didn't come up in the chat. So certainly, you know, scale is incredibly important, and you know, for us, we're a global business. You know, across Europe, we're in 16 markets, and again, coming back to that point about ease, about efficiency, most definitely, internationally is incredibly important.
And does that apply to you guys too? Are you rolling out different planning and buying methods across different markets? Does that make things easier for you?
Well, we've got a UK solution in Atlas, and then we've partnered with Hivestack outside of the UK. Scaling consistency is crucial, yeah.
We have a similar setup in which we have Ecos Now, which is running actively at the moment in the UK, and it's developing in a few other markets. And we're also working with the likes of Hivestack in regions where they have the exposure that we don't yet have.
Well, geography is obviously a key point of out of home, right? And I think markets have emerged as a result of the different changes. So like, you know, in the UK, we obviously see huge consolidation on the supply side. In other markets where there's kind of broader geographical differences or regionalities, like in North America, you have different DMAs. You've got, you know, different supply partners that are stronger in different places. And I think, you know, we obviously want to clearly retain like our local knowledge and our local understanding. And I think one of the tricky things with programmatic is it kind of means different things to different people, both in terms of what the value exchange is as well as the opportunity. And I think, you know, for some people it means consolidation. For some people it means acceleration. So, you know, as what we've been doing internally within the group is just been talking across markets, because that didn't really happen enough in the out-of-home space because of the nuances and the differences. So, you know, as part of our process, of course, we've been speaking to what's happened from the West. We've been talking to Ecosys in Publicis India about what's happening in these different markets where they have different policies in order to and of course Australia as well, where there's been different market issues in terms of the development of digital experiences in out-of-home space.
Cool. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing to actually hone in on, because the question about scale of being across multi-markets seems like quite a simple one to answer, right? Like the more places you're active, the better. But as Curtis just mentioned, and maybe I'm just reiterating the point, is that audiences behave completely different in those different countries. So flattening it out is a very quick way to like commoditize that a little bit. So it's a very important point I feel like Curtis made.
One back to you, actually, Chris. You mentioned earlier cherry picking of sites as part of the rationale for, you know, programmatic and automated trading, and I was wondering whether that's actually caused any problems with media owner partners, because they're used to selling in sort of functional blocks where they can build space and occupancy, and now you're granularizing and picking, certainly with Ecos Now, very individual hour-based blocks, and it prevents an opportunity cost sometimes with media owners. I was wondering what your feeling was with how that's going.
So far, the media owners have been very receptive to the idea of cherry picking sites. And just so we're clear, when we talk about cherry picking sites, that's not unique to programmatic. Like the amount of data that we're all working with in our separate organizations is all about targeting those best sites for those best audiences at those best moments when purchase is happening, whatever. But that ultimately comes down to cherry picking sites. Mm-hmm. We've been doing that for, I don't know, decades, right? So it's nothing new to us. What does tend to happen is there is a negotiation about price points of being specific versus being broadcast, but that's not a new discussion that we're having.
Okay. Aimee, I think just wondering whether you've got any up your sleeve, any case studies that you can share on the programmatic out-of-home side of things. Have you guys?
I think that might be nice to put to these guys, actually.
Yeah. Wow.
In terms of our launch campaign is actually one of my favourites. So this was for Fineco Bank. So talking about a client that isn't necessarily one of our biggest out-of-home spenders. However, they were looking to target a high net worth audience in London and the South East, and via using data, intelligent data to identify areas that over-index for average house price, as well as point of interest visits, so places like luxury stores and services and goods. We're able to identify the panels for them, but the reason that it's my favourite case study is the results that we got on the back of it. And I think quite often we think of out of home as being a broadcast channel. It's about impact, about awareness. This case study actually demonstrated that we've actually shifted those sharper end of the funnel metrics, things like action and intent. So well outperforming out of home benchmarks for that particular client.
Cool. Curtis?
I mean, my favourite programmatic campaign has been some work we've been doing over the last 2 or 3 years, and has evolved over that period of time through platform GSK, which is the GSK's media solution powered by Digitas and Spark Foundry. You know, one of their products is, if any hay fever sufferers here, is Pyrin. And hay fever is a weird thing insofar as, like, actually it's the allergies, and there's various different allergies that people have. So, you know, it might be to tree pollen or it might be to grass pollen. But there is a perfect storm at some point in the year where all these allergies just absolutely destroy anyone. But it offers a really difficult marketing challenge, right? When we talk about the logistics of actually activating that campaign and going live. When is it? You know, it depends on so many variables. So yes, we used, you know, pollen count data, but actually it was more about trying to not target the season, but target the sufferer. You know, try to actually help them and inform and engage with them on why what is the actual moment when they're going to most need to use that product. And obviously that then helps in terms of efficiencies in marketing and media spend as a result. And the latest culmination of that campaign was omni-channel. It actually ran not just in digital out of home, but it also ran in display and mobile, as well as on connected TV as well. And can't actually share any sales data with anyone, but it's done very well.
So you're using predictive data on the that perfect storm, and then activating campaigns based on that, is that?
Yeah, we worked with a data partner called TVTY to use pollen count data across all channels, so to offer an omni-channel solution that was programmatically bought.
Cool. Chris, I think.
My favourite one that we've done so far is probably the Asda one. So we've done a programmatic campaign with, oh, no, lovely, there it is, for Asda for their, to promote their petrol pricing. And the reason that I like it so much is because we've talked a bit about it opening up a new creative playing field, programmatic out of home. And it's a nice example of something which is a bit beyond the norm of the data sets that you tend to use on the day-to-day. So petrol pricing, as everyone knows, is a pretty variable beast. It goes up and down with different providers and different areas. And Asda had the challenge of needing to eloquently and reactively get that message out there to consumers when they're going to make the decision to stock up on petrol. So basically we ring-fenced 95 of their petrol forecourts to get that moment of decision-making, and then got a live feed of first-party data to be able to indicate when Asda's pricing is superior to their competitors in the area. And then we could dynamically add triggers based around location and serve that price point to the end consumer. So I just think it's a really nice combination of where, how, and when we should be trying to reach the consumer.
With that activation point as well, so people in their cars actually go and respond.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Right, I think that wraps us up for the first half of today. We're going to be back at 4 o'clock. And until then, we'll speak in a little while. Thanks.